So as the war in Gaza continues, I thought it could be worthwhile to take a step back and provide a bit of an overview of Hamas. So we're going to take a look at their political and military arms, key personnel, and then capabilities on the battlefield. Starting out, Hamas is an acronym for the Islamic Resistance Movement. They are a Palestinian, Sunni Islamic political and military organization formed in 1987 as an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. Following an electoral victory and a brief civil war in 2007, Hamas eventually gained political control over all of the Gaza Strip. Now, due to Hamas's targeting of civilians, the group has been designated a terrorist organization by the United States, Israel, Argentina, Australia, Canada, the European Union, Paraguay, and the United Kingdom. Nonetheless, Hamas remains Palestine's most popular political group, and due to its legal status and the ongoing military conflict between Hamas and Israel, it functions quite a bit differently than most other terrorist organizations. Now, a couple free sources for you here if these are general topics of interest. These are all ones I check out on a daily basis. I'll link them in the description below. First, the Telegram channels of Hamas's Qassam brigades. I mean, look, direct from the source here, and there can be a lot of value in seeing exactly what that organization is putting out. Second is the Generation Jihad podcast, which focuses more on terrorism and conflict in the Middle East. They're super knowledgeable about the ongoing war in Gaza and all related issues, but you should know going in that this is a pretty pro-Israeli outlet. The information they have is still very, very accurate and on point. Just recognize that potential bias going in. And then the last one here is International Intrigue. It is a daily email newsletter that does hit on the war in Gaza, but also provides quick updates on important national security and international relations stories from all around the world. So they've made their updates incredibly short, like 5 minutes or less to read, so you can quickly get a professional analysis of a wide range of topics provided by former diplomats. So you've got the Hamas Telegram channel giving you the Hamas point of view. Generation Jihad comes in from more of a pro-Israeli perspective. And then International Intrigue, which tries to remain apolitical, staying away from opinions and just providing the facts of what's happening. I'm a big fan. Again, each one of these are ones I check in on daily, and all will be linked in the description below. Starting with Hamas's political wing, the supreme governing body of Hamas is a 15-member council called the Political Bureau that is based in Doha, Qatar, and elected by a body known as the Shura Council. This exiled political wing, if you will, the ones in Qatar, not those in Gaza, they claim to have quite a bit of autonomy from the militant wing in Gaza and have claimed recently, for example, that they had no prior knowledge and were surprised by Hamas's attacks into Israel on October 7th. Now, at times, there's been a lot of tension between these external and internal leaders of Hamas, with those on the outside, at times, being accused of operating from ivory towers. More on that in a second. Then taking a look at some of the key figures on the political side, obviously you have Ismail Haniyeh, the current leader of Hamas, who serves as the chairman of the Politburo. Haniyeh is well-educated, previously served as the dean of the Islamic University of Gaza. He rose through the political ranks of Hamas and at one point served as the deputy chair of the organization. Haniyeh is alleged to be a multi-billionaire. You're going to see a theme there. Next up, Yahya Sinwar, Hamas's chief in the Gaza Strip. So again, looking at these two differences, right? Haniyeh, leader on the outside, overall leader of Hamas. Sinwar, leader of Hamas inside of Gaza. Sinwar has been the de facto ruler of the Strip since he was voted in as chief in 2017. Sinwar was a founding member of Hamas and was active in persecuting perceived Israeli collaborators. He established Hamas's police force in 1987, was convicted and sentenced to life in prison by Israel in 1988 for the killings of Israeli soldiers and Palestinian collaborators, some of whom he shot and others who he personally strangled. Sinwar was then freed, and more on this later, in a 2011 prisoner exchange, and he's currently believed to be in the tunnel networks in and around Khan Yunis in the southern portion of the Gaza Strip. Next up, we have the late Salah al-Aruri, the deputy chairman of the Hamas Politburo, who was killed in a strike on January 2nd in Beirut. Aruri served as the leader of Hamas in the West Bank and was the first commander, kind of the founding member of the Qassam brigades, the militant wing of Hamas. Prior to his death on January 2nd in an alleged Israeli airstrike, the United States had listed a $5 million bounty for information leading to the arrest of al-Aruri. Next up, we have Khaled Mashal, the chairman of the Hamas Politburo between 1996 and 2017. So really instrumental in making Hamas who they are today. He was a physics teacher by trade and one of the founding members of Hamas. In 1997, Mashal was nearly killed in an assassination attempt carried out by Mossad in Jordan. And then through an international agreement, Mossad had to deliver the antidote. Anyways, Mashal lived. In 2017, he said that he stepped down, kind of retired in a sense, but that's a little bit up for debate as in terms of how much of an influence he still has into the ongoing operations of Hamas. Lastly here, we have Musa Mohammed Abu Marzouk, who serves as kind of the top diplomatic role, regularly serving as kind of the international spokesperson for Hamas. He lived and studied in the United States, very fluent, very well-spoken in English, kind of fits him perfectly for this role. He's believed to have a personal fortune of over $3 billion and currently lives in Doha, Qatar. So you're seeing those numbers pop up here, right? Billionaires in the Hamas ruling class in the Politburo, and we're going to continue to come back to that. Then as of today, in early January 2024, Hamas is the most popular political entity in both the Gaza Strip and the West Bank by a considerable margin. There's been a handful of Palestinian polls conducted over the past few months, and what they show is that the October 7th attacks actually provided an increase in Hamas's popularity in both Gaza and the West Bank. Now, there's all sorts of challenges with any polls at baseline, even harder when you're talking about an organization like Hamas, even harder when it's being conducted in a war zone like Gaza. But historical trends there kind of fit, and it makes sense, given the nature of the fighting, that there has been a shift in support to more Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank supporting Hamas. On the financial front, it's believed that Hamas operates a funding network with an annual budget of around $1 billion up until this last September. Qatar was providing Hamas with around $30 million a month, and Iran provides direct military assistance in the forms of weapons and training, in addition to financial support. Around 40% of Hamas's finances are provided directly by foreign states like Iran, like Qatar, and others. Other sources of potential revenue for Hamas include the taxation of Gaza residents. Foreign charities actually provide a substantial amount, and then a lot of tariffs on smuggled goods into the Gaza Strip. Then top Hamas leaders are believed to have leveraged the organization's financing network to amass significant personal wealth. The collective net worth of the Politburo members, 15 of them, is estimated to exceed $10 billion, which is a crazy amount, right? Even if it's off by a magnitude of 10, 20, 50, put that in comparison with the average citizen in Gaza, the people that they are supposed to be representing, right? The Gaza's in a mess right now. So much of the area is uninhabitable, but even before this war kicked off, much of the population lived in poverty. And so you can see where there's some tension here between the people on the ground in Gaza, working with the Palestinian citizens, and then the leadership in Hamas, in Qatar and elsewhere, amassing a net worth north of $10 billion across the senior leadership. Then shifting over to the militant arm of Hamas, we're talking about the Qassam Brigades. This is named after the Syrian jihadists who targeted the British and Jewish presence in Mandatory Palestine and whose killing contributed to the outbreak of the Great Arab Revolt in 1936. Prior to the October 7th attacks, it was estimated that the Qassam Brigades had around 35,000 fighters in their ranks. When looking at key personnel, we could kind of go down a big, long list of battalion and brigade commanders. A lot of them have been eliminated at this point by Israel. One big name stands out, and that's Mohammed Deif. He's been the commander of the Qassam Brigade since 2002. In 2006, he was seriously wounded in an Israeli assassination attempt. His deputy took over for a short period of time until the deputy was killed. So essentially, since 2002, Deif has been in charge of the militant arm of Hamas. Deif is credited with kind of developing innovative new ways to attack Israel, including the development of these tunnels and rockets to be fired into Israeli territory. Now, while Deif is credited with identifying new tactics and ways to attack Israel, it's not clear how much of a role he played in the planning or execution of the October 7th attack. The reason I say that is it's believed right now that Deif is maimed, blind, wheelchair-bound, and is unlikely to be playing any sort of significant role in the tactical command of the Qassam Brigades. In fact, just a few months ago, Israel dropped pamphlets all across Gaza listing bounties for information leading to the death or capture of senior Qassam and senior Hamas leaders. They listed $400,000 for Sinwar, right? Makes sense. $300,000 for Sinwar's brother, who commands forces in southern Gaza, $300,000 for Rafa Saleh, who commands the Khan Yunis battalion, and then the lowest number they offered was 100,000 for Mohammed Deif. Some said this was just some Israeli trolling, but could also point to the fact that Deif is little more than a figurehead now, with little role in the day-to-day operations of Qassam. The Qassam brigades are pretty well spread out. They have elements in the Gaza Strip, West Bank, and southern Lebanon. Of course, the Gaza Strip is the group's largest hub, where it operates overtly as 5 regional brigades, further divided into 24 regional battalions. In the West Bank, the Qassam brigades operates more as an underground entity. Remember how many times you heard people say there's no Hamas in the West Bank? There is. Hamas will occasionally claim responsibility for attacks that their members carried out in the West Bank. They're not as overt there as they are in Gaza, where they had political and governmental control of that entire area. Then in Lebanon, Qassam operates under the essential protection of Hezbollah in the southern portions of the country. Compared to Gaza, again, very, very small element in Lebanon, but there is a Hamas presence, is a Qassam presence in southern Lebanon that since October 7th has carried out attacks into Israeli territory. Qassam is notable for having constructed these significant tunnel networks that we're seeing more and more of all across Gaza that are believed to span around 400 kilometers, with some, and we've seen footage of this, wide enough to drive a car through. Additionally, Qassam operates a well-trained naval commando unit known as the Nukba Force. You've probably heard that term thrown around a couple times. The Nukba Force's primary role is to spearhead operations and raids into Israeli territory, as they did on October 7th. Additionally, Qassam operates an aerial division that employs non-traditional aircraft. It's not helicopters and planes. Instead, it's suicide drones, bomb-dropping drones like quadcopters, as well as manned paramotors or paragliders. Again, something that we saw Hamas utilize pretty effectively during the October 7th raid into Israel. Now, historically, Hamas is responsible for more than 40% of all suicide bombings against Israeli targets, which is more than any other Palestinian militant group. We haven't seen that so far in this war. There's been some rumors of suicide operations, but as we sit here today, again, early January, we haven't really seen, that I'm aware of, the use of Hamas or Qassam using suicide bombers to attack Israeli targets. However, it is a part of their history. Another Hamas or Qassam tactic that's on full display right now is abducting Israeli soldiers or citizens to use them as objects of negotiation for the release of Palestinian prisoners. Prior to October 7th, there's now still more than 100 hostages being held by Hamas from that attack. Prior to that, the most successful example of this was the abduction of an IDF tank crewman near the Gaza border in 2006. His release was secured in 2011 in exchange for 1,027 Palestinian prisoners, including the future Gaza chief Yahya Sinwar. Then looking at the weapons available to Hamas in Gaza, their armament, as expected, AK-style rifles, RPK machine guns, sniper rifles, RPGs, grenades, IEDs, mortars, rockets, and they do have some more sophisticated weapons as well. Things like man-pads, man-portable air defense systems, ATGMs, anti-tank guided missiles, 120-millimeter mortars, things like that, as well as the Fajr 5, which is a medium-range rocket capable of ranging Tel Aviv from Gaza. Those larger weapon systems tend to be broken down into smaller components, smuggled in, and then reassembled once they're inside of Gaza. Additionally, though, Hamas has developed the capability to manufacture some of their own munitions inside of Gaza. The most famous one here is, or most notable, I would say, is probably the Qassam rockets. Lots of videos of these in recent days. Short-range rocket artillery, unguided, pretty wild in terms of accuracy, really can only be used against Israeli targets and communities directly adjacent to the Gaza Strip. We've got the Shawaz charge, which is an EFP designed to penetrate armor. And just looking at this thing and recognizing Hamas's relationship with Iran, you got to imagine there's just a little bit of Iranian influence in that design and construction. And then we're seeing tons of videos of these, the RPG-7 VR, which is the tandem charge anti-tank RPG round. Hamas has been all about these, right? They showed the construction of this warhead and the storage and how many of these they have on hand. And it's kind of their go-to anti-tank weapon in Gaza right now. Since its inception, the capabilities, popularity, and role of Hamas in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict have been constantly increasing in really every conceivable way. However, it is possible that this current war might be a bridge too far for Hamas. I mean, the stated goal by the Israeli government, supported by a large portion of the Israeli population, is the complete elimination of Hamas from the Gaza Strip. I mean, but you're seeing the challenges they're going to have, right? It's a relatively spread out political military organization with relatively widespread support throughout portions of Gaza and the West Bank. that's just a little sneak peek into the background of Hamas. It's incredibly complex. There's so much to it. But I just thought, we're seeing the name, the organization thrown out there in the news so much. Maybe it would be helpful to step back, kind of get an overview of who and what they actually are. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.